You're very welcome. The theme of this conference poses a provocative and complex question for all of us. How equal is Ireland today when it comes to opportunities to access higher education? And we got a snippet of just what we are facing in terms of what it is we have to do. I believe that it is timely that we reflect on this question as we approach 2016, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Irish state, the cornerstone of which was and continues to be the guarantee of equal rights and equal opportunities for all citizens, and the commitment engraved in the proclamation of 1916 to cherish all of our children equally. There is no doubt that in common with most of the Western world, we, the Irish, have travelled a long way. We have broke down some of the barriers that, in the past, faced women, people with disabilities, religious and ethnic minorities, and indeed other groups accessing both education and employment. National statistics show that young people in Ireland now progress to higher education levels, unimaginable just even 30 years ago. For example, I'm in my 6th decade, and when I went to college in the mid-1960s, I was accompanied by only 10% of my age cohort. 10%. Eurostat data published just last week show that we continue to be first in the EU for levels of higher education attainment among our younger age cohorts. I think it's just over 60% at present. Earlier this year, as part of Ireland's presidency of the European Union, I brought specific proposals to my colleagues in the Council of Education Ministers for the adoption of Council conclusions on the social dimension of higher education. These conclusions focus on the importance of securing more equitable access to higher education through developing coherent national planning, monitoring and evaluation systems around access, progression and completion for underrepresented groups in higher education. And I stress the word completion, because access is the start, but for many, sadly, it is not the completion. The expansion of higher education in recent years has masked some notable disparities. Available data shows a significant socioeconomic bias in favour of students whose parents have a high level of education and resources. As a result, they tend to have more opportunities than others to successfully finish their studies. There are still, in my view, too many capable students who do not participate in higher education due to their socioeconomic circumstances, insufficient educational supports, and many other obstacles. Not only does this increase the risk of unemployment and social exclusion, it represents an unnecessary waste of human potential. We all know in this room that Ireland is a deeply unequal society. Wealth and influence is concentrated in a very small minority of our population. But insofar as we know scientifically and sociologically, intelligence, talent, and creativity is, we believe, distributed equally across all of our people. If we are serious about equal opportunities and enabling everyone to realize his or her full potential, then we simply cannot afford, economically, socially, politically, or morally, to neglect the talents and abilities of people with fewer resources. Ladies and gentlemen and friends, I believe that we need to remove the barriers that exist between different parts of the education system. For instance, by developing new routes into higher education from vocational training and non-formal or work-based learning. We need to increase opportunities for more flexible and part-time learning using ICT and open educational resources. And also we need to increase the attractiveness and the relevance of higher education courses, as well as ensuring more student-centred teaching and learning. I personally believe this is a very challenging landscape for all of us, but perhaps most challenging for the existing squatters on the higher education landscape today at present. And I use the word squatters deliberately. Higher education institutions are key to ensuring that equity of educational opportunity is a feature throughout the education system, both as providers in their own right and also given their central role in training, teaching staff for the other levels in the education system. As Minister for Education and Skills, I set out to transform the higher education landscape so that it can deliver on a number of essential national objectives. Equity of access for all students is among the most important of these. The Department has elaborated a performance framework for higher education in order to drive this transformation agenda in cooperation with the institutions and with the Higher Education Authority, and you will be hearing more of that later today. This will, I believe, help us to focus on the important issues and measure the effectiveness of the system as a whole in responding to national priorities. Now, some people in our system don't like the word measure. As a politician in a democratic society, we're confronted every time there's an election. We're confronted with it in our workplace in many ways. And that accountability and that assessment has to be seen as the norm, not the exception. So it is not an intrusion into academic independence or the pursuit of excellence that we should insist on a degree of measurement. How do we measure, the way in which we measure, and what we do with the results of that measurement, of course, have to be discussed. But the idea that you can't somehow or other introduce the concept of measurement, that day's over. That day's gone. There is nobody who's in the public sector who is drawing taxpayers' money from families whose children will never see the inside of a university or a level of higher education, who can't in fact be excluded from that concept of accountability, which is what it is. I believe that such actions will help us to focus on the important issues and, as I said, to measure the effectiveness of the system as a whole in responding to our national priorities. However, and I believe this very strongly, it is at local and regional level, through our work within and between clusters of educational institutions, schools and other partners, that the battle for equity of access will be won. I know that some excellent initiatives have been developed and that you will hear some of these examples here later today in the parallel sessions. I've also seen the interesting publication of research papers for this conference and indeed the impressive poster presentations along the wall to my right, including the video that we just saw. We must ensure, in my view, that the commitment of institutions to this work on access is captured in the institutional compacts that form part of the performance framework, and that what works is translated effectively from institutional and programme level to national level. That's a big mouthful. It's a big mouthful. But we all have to swallow it. We all have to swallow it if we are to actually be true to what our vocation is in meeting the terms of the Proclamation of 1916. To that end, I believe that we must combine our energies and resources right across the education spectrum to transform opportunities for groups and communities that do not currently see higher education as an option for them. And I have many of them in the constituency of Dublin South East. It gets derided, or it used to get derided by that famous Mayo journalist when he derided Dublin South East as the Dublin 4 set. Well, I can tell you that Dublin 4 stretches all the way in from City Quay to Aylesbury Road. And as I try to explain that in more graphic terms to somebody who was disparaging my lack of understanding of what deprivation might be, I described Dublin South East, Dublin 2, 4 and 8 as extending all the way from Skid Row to Embassy Row. And it's there today. And the levels of deprivation along the quays of Dublin South East are as deprived as anywhere else in this country. No part of our community has a monopoly of it, and yet we tend to be blind in walking past people who would never, even though their grandparents and great-parents have lived all around Trinity College, many of them have never even walked through the campus. Many of them have never even walked through the campus. So therefore we do need to combine our energies and to ensure that those people who've walked around Trinity College campus or many other campuses now feel that they too have the right to walk through it. I understand that a new national access plan is being developed which will bring us up to 2016, and indeed all of the important anniversaries that this decade of commemorations will refer to. This plan will provide an opportunity to reflect on what we have achieved so far, which is quite considerable, but also to focus on the work that remains to be done, In particular, it will be a chance to consider what further steps we need to take to ensure that all of our citizens can participate if they want to, and progress and contribute to society to the fullest extent of their personal potential. I look forward very much to hearing the contributions that will continue today, and I want to thank you again for the invitation to have the honour to open this particular conference. Thank you very much indeed.